All right. Well, we're so fortunate to have with us today Anand Nandakumar. He's the founder and CEO of Halo.car. And Jesse, I don't know if you know about this company, but they can drop off an EV with you in Las Vegas right now. And I think they can do it remotely. So let's find out about that. Thank you so much, Anand, for being with us today.
Super excited to be here. Thanks for having me. Cool. By the way, I'm a huge fan of your channel, so
thank you.
I'm excited to be on.
So yeah, tell us about Halo.car. What is it you guys do?
Yeah, Halo is a unique product where our customers take our app, push a button, request a car. We will remotely drive an all-electric vehicle with nobody inside to just deliver the car to you. Once the car is delivered, you as a customer hop into the driver's seat, drive it how much ever you want. When you're done, parking is the biggest problem when you drive your own car. So we're saying, don't even park the car, just hop off and walk away. We will then remotely drive the car to our next customer.
What? Okay, let me just stop at that point because that is a big point. You're saying that I don't even have to worry about really parking it well or anything. Just, I guess, put it someplace safe, like not middle of the highway, and then you'll take it from there?
That's exactly right. Yes.
So wait, why haven't I heard of you? Because I mean, wait, let's take a step back. Because I mean, you have all sorts of self-driving technology and stuff like that?
Not at all. So we're actually saying that self-driving is going to take another 15 years to be actually fully developed and commercially ready. So this is a bridge to getting driverless cars to be deployed on public roads. There are two angles that we need to talk about here. One is the reasoning why it's going to take this long for it to be commercially viable is because of long tail edge cases. What do you do when there's a random bed in the middle of the road? What do you do when a random child that is not detected just jumps in front? How does that fleet of vehicles interact with that? It's a big difficulty. The other big difficulty is when all cars are autonomous, the problem is already solved. Coexisting with human drivers is the biggest challenge for autonomy to be solved. The third biggest problem I want to talk about is trust, right? So consumers have never seen a self-driving car driving in public roads. As general population, we've never seen it. We've only seen people sitting behind the wheel and driving the car end to end. So when we're actually in that phase, how do we create this trust? How do we create this way where people or general consumers are super aware of what it's doing and they bring this trust to it? So think of Halo as a way to bridge. That's what we're saying. It's remotely driven or remotely piloted, very similar to the US drone operators that are operating our cars, which drone operators have been doing this for 20 plus years, right? Very similar kind of mindset, but only to deliver a car to you. Once a car is delivered, you are behind the wheel controlling the vehicle yourself to drive yourself to your destination.
All right, so I have one question, which is, do you have to have a remote driver for every car in your fleet, or is there some overlap?
Yeah, so right now, a remote pilot, we call them remote pilot, they can operate a whole fleet of cars because they only reposition a few minutes, 5 to 6 minutes to get a car from a customer to another customer or a parking lot to a customer. And then the customer takes over when they get freed up. At that moment, they now shift to another vehicle, reposition that vehicle on our fleet to another customer. So the ratio starts increasing drastically. And then the interesting thing here is if you start introducing autonomy to this equation, what happens is a remote pilot now think of as a exoskeleton for industrial workers. So now their capabilities get magnified. So they can now operate a bigger fleet, which causes a lot of efficiency for us and a lot of margins, end of the day, operating a huge fleet of electric vehicles.
So Halo.car, the way that it's going to work is you're saying it's a bridge to get us to fully autonomous vehicles. And the way that that's going to work is I'm going to have a car that I drive, but then when I'm done driving the car, it's going to be driven away by a remote pilot. And so you have remote control cars, like full size,
exactly
like not little, you have full sized electric vehicles
right.
that are driving around. Now, when I watch,
do you guys make these vehicles? Who makes these vehicles?
Because back when I watched the Mythbusters, it would take them half an episode just to make the car drive itself before, remote control before they could smash it into a, telephone pole or whatever to do, test some myth. But now you're telling me that you just have a fleet of fully remote control cars that connect up to somebody who's sitting in a place with a little steering wheel?
Yeah, so we're not in the game of making our own cars. There are beautiful people that are very popular that are making all these electric vehicles. That's not our strength. But what we do is we build a retrofit kit that is proprietary for us. We've took 4 years to build this. That has 6 cameras that we add to the car. and a whole compute unit, and lots of modems and antennas that go into the car strategically to get the best possible network connection. So all that gets integrated into the vehicle. And once it's integrated, it gives us the full vertical access to the vehicle to control it fully remote. So just like our remote pilots, they sit in our mission control, they have actual steering wheel, actual foot pedal, throttle, braking, very similar to how you sit in a car yourself, but they can have a much better visibility. The way the camera is integrated, they can see a full 360-degree visibility around the car without a very, very small little blind spot. That's it. As a car operator, when you sit yourself inside the car, you have a significant blind spot, right? So all of that is kind of eliminated for remote pilot. They can actually see way better than ourselves sitting inside the car.
And I see that you're right now renting out Kia Niros and Bolts. Is the reason why you're not doing Teslas? I mean, because I would think, oh, why not Teslas? They've already got the cameras and stuff. Is that because it's hard to integrate your hardware into that?
At the moment it is, but it's not. And, we will have it sometime in the future. We're optimistic. If not, you can talk to your friend to make it happen for us.
All right, we'll just tweet at Elon. So another thing you just mentioned was that you're driving around, driverlessly with these remote drivers. Is this because you're able to do it in Las Vegas because they've got certain laws there that allow you to do it? Because I assume you can't do that like here in Boston.
No, honestly speaking, you cannot do this anywhere in the world except for Nevada. It took us a while for us to work with the DMV of Nevada to pass the first ever legislation. So we're the first company in the world to commercially operate this on public roads.
And is the idea that if it works well there, that other cities will want to turn it on? It'll be easier to get the next city and the next city?
Absolutely, yes. So the funny story is I started the company in San Francisco. So I used to live there. At first, when the product was getting good to a point where I need to find a commercial path, I started working with the California regulators, but it just was very difficult to get this through California regulations. It's really, really difficult. That's when I started working with, multiple different networks, multiple different carriers, or cities and states, and found that Nevada was a very, very optimistic state. They were the first ones to pass a self-driving car legislation back in 2011. So they were very progressive, right? So that's why I moved the company to Nevada. Now we're based in Las Vegas and worked really closely with the DMV to get this regulation passed.
So I see that you're offering electric cars. I assume you could have done this with gas cars. Why are you doing EVs?
Yeah, the vision why I started the company in the first place is to rapidly transition the world away from gasoline cars to all electric without the need of owning a car. Though, if you try to unpack this a little bit, there's a lot of meat to that bone, right? Number one, private cars are one of the biggest carbon emitters in the transportation space. 41% of all carbon emissions coming from transportation are from private cars. So shifting to electric makes perfect sense. Let's not even go to the grid yet. We'll stick to the transportation segment for now, right? And the second part of this private cars, if you think about EVs in general, the only way a consumer gets access to an EV today is via private car ownership. That's it, right? If you own a car right now, it's just sitting 96% of the time. That is only 1 hour a day we end up driving that car, right? And then number two is if you try to buy an EV, it's too expensive. It's $40,000 to start. Not everybody's able to afford a $40,000 car. That's why the transition is not fast enough. And number three big problem is even if you're able to afford that $40,000 car, you have to now retrofit your house with some form of charging infrastructure. So it's a big limiting factor for general population to shift drastically fast. For us to make this big climate impact by 2030, we need to make a big shift towards EVs. That's the only way we can actually make that big impact. That's why I started Halo in the first place, because now we can hit two birds in a single stone. One is rapidly transition away from all gasoline cars to electric as fast as possible by making it extremely affordable and convenient. And number two, now we can actually focus on changing the cities. Because if you think about it, when cars are being parked, and 23 hours in a day, city centers in the US are more parking lots than actual storefronts or affordable housing, right? So now cars are moving around instead of just sitting around. So now the city designers and engineers can actually rethink the whole walkable city, green friendly city. That's the reasoning why I started Halos in the first place, which means that we only have to focus on EVs and making it more affordable, convenient, and accessible. That's it.
Speaking to the affordable part, so if I'm a consumer and I've got some options now, I can buy a car, maybe I can take an Uber. Tell me, if I'm now going, Halo, would this work for me? How much is it cheaper than doing an Uber?
Actually, when we're fully scaled, it's 50% cheaper than Uber. Right? So if you think about Uber right now, the cost of Uber has gone up 90% in the last 12 months. It's because, they're a public company. They need to find a way to get to profitability. So the costs are going up. So it's no more than a glorified taxi service at the moment, right? But if you really radically need to think through how do we change transportation and make it more affordable, we don't mind driving ourselves. But if you think about driving, the biggest difficulty is, how do I find a way to think about parking? When you start driving, we always where am I going to park this car? That becomes always a question in your head. When you get there, we're circling 20, 30, 40 minutes to find a really good parking spot. If the cars are never parked, we don't mind driving. And the biggest cost of an Uber ride is a driver themselves sitting in the car driving one person around at all times. So if we shift that, we can actually have a better way to make very affordable Uber rides.
Now, I noticed on your website you have a map of Las Vegas, and there's two spots I want to talk about. One is a little green triangle thing downtown, and the other is a red spot, which I think is the airport. Why can't I get a Halo car at the airport?
Oh my God, you're just asking $1 billion question here. So there are a lot of regulations and red tapes around the airports, to be very candid and honest about this. So this is something that we've been working with the airport very closely to find a way to get this inside the airport. To be honest, I don't think we're there yet. And I don't know when it'll be available, but we've taken a chapter, saying in the company saying we want regulators and policymakers to be a part of the company and not go against them, right? That's why we're saying we will work as closely as possible. We will draft every kind of policy possible to make sure that it's available in every state and every city. So that's why the airport's not there yet.
Gotcha. And then what is that little green spot?
Yeah. So I'm going to explain the map in a much better way. So there are 4 stages of our operations and how we launch. The first stage is fully manual, no remote deliveries whatsoever. So when you come to Vegas right now, the whole blue spot, the whole city, is manual deliveries only. That is, when you request a car, one of our agents will sit in the car, drive the car, and just deliver it to you. So the customer experience is exactly the same throughout every state, every single stage. Second stage is we now know where demand is coming from and where our operations needs to get better. And we use remote driving capabilities to start delivering the cars in the high demand areas, which we've focused to be downtown as the high demand area. That's the second stage we launched with a safety driver inside. So they will be sitting inside, but remotely delivered. That goes towards third stage, where the safety driver gets removed from the car, goes back in the chase car. Now the car is fully driverless, but with a remote piloted car that's being delivered. That's the third stage that we're kicking off in about a month and a half. And then final stages, there's no chase car. The entire fleet is full and fully driverless and deployed in public roads with no driver inside and all electric and fully remotely driven.
Now, one of the things I like about an Uber is that I just get in and I don't have to think. Especially if I'm in a new city and I don't know my way around. But this would be, I will have to think. I'm going to have to drive the car to work or whatever. So have you found that your customers care about that or not?
Actually, none of our customers care about that, because when they come into, say, Las Vegas, they know where they want to go, which hotel they're going to stay, or which area they want to go. And another interesting thing is they've actually asked us, hey, what else can we do outside the Strip? Right? The Strip is the only area people come to when you come to Vegas. But when I moved here, I started exploring all these new areas. There's so many beautiful mountains, so many natural areas that we can go to, recreation areas we can go to, Hoover Dam, a whole bunch of stuff. So we constantly push promotions to our customers saying, hey, we will do this package. So get a car from us and we will get a lift ticket, go ski in one of our mountains here, right? So these kind of new areas they've never explored before, this is a way for them to get into that new exploration ideas.
Now, I'm guessing if you can add Teslas to the fleet and other brands like Rivians and Polestars and stuff, that would be another kind of way to generate customers, right? Because I might want to check out the new Lucid, and if you had it in your fleet, it would be like, hey, I get to rent this for the day. Is that something that you're looking at?
Absolutely, yes. In fact, this also works in both ways, right? One is exposure to a new car the customer wants to try for low cost. Instead of buying a $70,000 Rivian, they can just try it for a few hours. This also works from the OEM side. Think about it for a second, right? As an OEM, the whole point of why they give a test drive is to give customers an experience to drive the car. But instead of just one small little test drive around the block, why not keep it for a few hours and try it out? See if it actually fits well with your day-to-day activities and your family activities. If it does, then you actually shift towards that vehicle form factor. And the third one I want to kind of bring about is most of our customers have never driven an EV. So this is a way to bring about awareness of what EVs are, what charging means, what the pickup times are, the zipness of the car, all that kind of just explores, opens their mind.
And so how long, like if I, rented one of your cars and I want to kind of keep it for a little bit longer, and I do actually want to park it somewhere for a little bit because I want to keep some of my bags in there while I go hiking. Is that an okay thing? Like, is that something that you allow?
Absolutely. Yeah. Customers right now have it from a few hours to a few days. Some of the customers have had it for well over 7 days. Actually, we have 2 customers. They don't want to give the car back. They keep renewing it, renewing it because they just love the experience of an EV. Once you drive it, you don't want to go back to your traditional gasoline cars, right? So it's a huge way to bring the awareness to new EVs and new kind of vehicle form factors.
Now, how do you guys handle charging? Because I'm assuming most customers don't really want to deal with it other than your 2 customers who want the car. And so I'm assuming that you guys take care of the charging. And is that something that you have found is easy to do with the publicly available chargers, or do you have to install some of your own?
Well, and also, how do you do it when the car doesn't have a driver in it?
Yeah, do you have a Tesla bot or something?
With most EVs, it's like, and then you plug it in. You, the driver, plug it in. And now it's like, who's going to plug this car in?
I mean, these are beautiful problems, right? Part of the journey is solving these incredible problems, right? Not just for a company, but also the future of what the world needs, right? So the number one thing is we are basically saying the customer should not be worrying about charging, because that is an operational challenge that we can solve at high scale, high volume, much better than an average consumer worrying about their own car, right? That's why the model is really made well, shifting away from owning the cars to a fleet of cars that are driving around. Think about this for a second. Our fleets say they operate in New York at one point, right? When the cars are inside the city, they're just fulfilling all these rides around. When it's done towards the end of the day, they leave the city with nobody inside to go charge outside the cities, right? One of the biggest difficulties for charging providers is bringing a massive power line into a city center. It's an extremely expensive endeavor. But if you could do it outside the cities, like literally the outskirts of the city, it's a significant drop in cost of installation. So with this model, we can remotely pilot the car with nobody inside to go to a charging station that's outside, right? And the car charges over there and comes back into the city for actually fulfilling the demand. So right now, it's one of our operators there in charging stations. When the car gets there, they see the car is there, they plug the car in, literally manually to charge the car. When it's done, they unplug it, right? There are so many different ways. We can do a Tesla Snake that comes in and charges, or we can do induction charging. That's getting better. It's not there yet. It's getting better. That's another way to charge the car wirelessly. So all these kind of options we can explore, but we've not gotten there yet.
So what's your vision? You'd said in the beginning of the interview that, you thought about 15 years till we might get to fully autonomous. I'm probably going to push back on that. I feel like we'll get there sooner, but you did say commercially, it is going to take a while to get it fully adopted. So what's your vision? Let's say 5 years from now, let's say 2028, for the city of Las Vegas. Are you picturing that your company will have had an impact on, let's say, traffic?
Honestly, yes. Not only traffic, but also shaping the city itself. When we alleviate the parking lots from downtowns and denser city environments, now the city has a much better way to rethink what the parking lot could be used for, right? One of the examples I'll give you here is it's already happening. One of the hotels that we partner with in downtown, they've actually gone to the city to pitch the city saying, we should not be giving one-to-one parking space for every single room. It's too expensive, too cumbersome. Instead, we're going to offer Halo.car service for all the guests that come in. Now that parking space gets alleviated. So they've actually done this right now in downtown.
Oh, wait. So from a planning board perspective, like when you're on a city, there's these requirements each municipality has that says you have to have this many, parking spaces for your customers. So you're saying that if I go to open a hotel, instead of having to, dedicate a giant parking lot or parking garage, I might be able to lower that requirement by using your technology. Wow.
Exactly.
And that
That's
could
really
mean
cool.
more rooms, which means more revenue,
Right.
which means smaller buildings, or
And more fun for your customers because now instead of like, they don't really want a bigger parking lot.
or to have to walk across to get to the
Right.
nearest place.
And think about it. When you rent a car, no matter where, it's not only the hassle of renting you have to go through, right? But then when you have the car, you literally park in an hour, 96%. You're driving in just an hour, if that.
God, if you guys could move to New York, because I'm telling you, the biggest frustration with going to New York is you bring your car there and then you have to deal with your car while you're there.
Okay, but you know what? I don't think this is doable, because what happens when you have this car, which is being piloted remotely, and then you lose internet service to the car, and now it's a missile. It has no contact back to base. It doesn't know what to do, and it's going to go slamming into things. I don't think that we can have this.
No, it's a good point. It must have been hard talking to regulators because they probably were thinking like that.
Well, but how do you solve that problem?
How did you solve it?
Yeah, so this is one of our unique patents that we've filed. It's a huge patent and a huge trade secret, to be very honest. So every
tell
car
us.
has all. So every car has all three networks in it. So T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon. In fact, we have deep partnerships with all of them. In fact, T-Mobile is also invested in the company because the IP that we've created is so unique in allowing us to operate this car on a public road without deficits in the network falling apart, right? So we understand that not one network is perfect. There are gaps in all the networks, but we have this 3 tiers of redundancy that allows us to bridge the gap between networks to create a stable connection to the car. That's number one. Number two is we understand no matter how much redundancies you do, the inspirations obviously from aviation, where every part in an aircraft is redundant, right? No matter how much redundancy you do, there's always going to have a fail-safe. That is a last but resort, right? In this case, we call it an MRC, or a minimum risk condition. If all 3 networks fail, or if any component that we've integrated inside the car fails, the car comes to an automatic safe stop. We don't want to create that missile scenario, right? The car comes automatically a stop. At that moment, the car has self-diagnostics in itself to diagnose itself to see if the state is coming back to healthy. If it does, it allows another remote pilot to connect to it. If not, it just calls for help, and we go dispatch an actual human operator to take over the vehicle and bring it back. We diagnose everything, see what really went wrong, push a software update or a hardware update to get it back to the fleet.
Let's say that your remote pilot wasn't thinking and they accidentally drove it into the Lincoln Tunnel, to use New York as an example, and then you have your car and it drives 14 feet into the Lincoln Tunnel, and it goes lost communication with base, and it stops, and now you have blocked one of the lanes of the Lincoln Tunnel, which happens all the time, but it's not going to be a great news story for Halo.car, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. We want to have only good news, right? So the way you can mitigate that is in multiple ways. One is obviously tech ways we can improve it, but I'll talk about from operational perspective first. We're not deploying the car everywhere. We're only running the car in surface streets at less than 25 miles an hour. We're not going to be driving at the freeway 60 miles an hour. In fact, autonomy is very good at driving in freeway conditions because level 2, level 3 is really good at that. Where autonomy really struggles with is low speed, denser environments is where autonomy really struggles. That's what remote pilots are very good at. So if you combine these two, we actually can drive through the tunnel autonomously, and then a remote pilot takes over when it comes out of the tunnel, does like small little interactions and get the cars back into autonomy.
That's cool. Okay, so you've been working with the Las Vegas government. I assume they want to like give you a report card or get a report card from you to kind of see like, is this doing well? How do you work with the city to make sure that the regulators are happy and that they're getting the data they need?
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, it's like building a relationship, right? With anything, we build this relationship with our partners. That's why we call the regulators our partners. So they get to see how we drive, where we drive, what the conditions are, how we're meeting the conditions, how we're progressing through the stages of what our own stages that we've defined. What are the categories and criteria that we've set for progression? So all these kind of things we share with our own regulators and policymakers, so they get to see how does this new technology come into play? Because a couple of things here, if you put yourself in the regulator's shoes, right? So they get no incentive when a company comes in and they regulate the company and they succeed, but they get all the downside if the company fails, right? So we need to find a way to mitigate that and get them comfortable. One of the biggest challenges the regulators, when we talk to them, they face with autonomous cars is it's a machine learning model that's driving the car. which inherently a machine learning model is non-deterministic, which means that you cannot predict what it's going to do end of the day. You can actually you need billions of miles to prove statistically that it's going to do the right thing, but that's the biggest difficulty regulators are having comprehension over. But when a remote driver is driving it as a human operator, which has been de-risked over decades and decades of people driving the car with enough data and statistics already there, the only problem that we need to solve is the connectivity piece, which we have a massive patent on, which we have done well over 4 years to implement it, right? That's how we work with regulators saying, look at this is how we do it. And having this fully deployed in the first state and the first city gives us comfort with other states and other cities to say, hey, this works in one city. For some reason, it's good. Let's explore. Let's invite them to come down and start experimenting and testing in our new cities, which is already happening. We have cars in other cities right now we're testing.
I can imagine that the conversation is going to shift from this fear-based discussion of like, well, we're afraid if you come to our city, to after you've proven yourself to being like, please come to my city. Because first of all, it's a tourist attraction. I mean,
it alleviates stress for tourists.
Exactly. I mean, the thought of going to most new cities is largely based around parking and traffic and all those kind
and
of things.
renting a car,
Right.
and then you got to fill it up before you bring it there. But of course, all the gas stations around the frickin' Hertz rental drop off, they know that, so they raise the price like 50%. And you're like,
yeah, and you don't fill it. It's $10 a gallon.
yeah, exactly. And you're like, okay, do I pay $5 a gallon or do I pay $10 a gallon? Because it's going to take me another 20 minutes to get back on the road, and then with the parking and all that. So it's like someone who wants to go to a city, there either has to be really great public transportation in order to get a tourist around that city, or they need to rent a car, which means parking at the hotel, parking at every place that they want to visit, or they're going to be renting an Uber, or they have to walk.
Right.
And it's like, or maybe a Lime scooter. But I mean, between those things, that's the only way for someone who doesn't have a car to get to the city, especially if they're flying in.
Yeah. So, I mean, your service actually, if it works, should start to reduce the number of cars on the road, which I think everyone can agree is a good thing.
That's right. And shift from gasoline to electric rapidly, right? And make it more affordable for everyone, right? I'll give you a story here, right? I'm from India, originally born and raised. Right? I don't come from a rich family, very, very lower middle class family. My mom and I would take the bus for 4 hours one way to go to school.
Wow.
And it would take me 4 hours to get back from school each way, right? Think about the difficulties my mom went through to take a little kid in that bus in India, right? This is happening in the US as well. What if we change that? What if we find a way to say, hey, use a Halo to connect to a public transit system? And when you get there, there's another Halo car there that you can just jump in and drive yourself to work, which means that now people in areas of lower income households can afford to go to search for a bigger job, better job, it's going to be a better paying job to get to a different part of the city. All these kind of possibilities starts unlocking right now.
Well, you just mentioned, a kid going to school. Is it possible, or is this another step of regulation to have a remote driver drive someone who maybe can't drive themselves around? Because that's a big topic in fully autonomous vehicles, is that people who are blind or people who have other disabilities that prevent them from doing it, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have autonomy again. Mm-hmm. So you're saying that could this kind of be a stopgap for those people?
Honestly, I would love for it to be, but at this stage of the company, it's not. I'll tell you why. There are two reasons why it's not. One is when we remotely drive someone sitting inside, our liability is through the roof. Our insurance goes up drastically, right? Which is just not economical for us. And number two is now a remote pilot is dedicated to a car at all times. So it's still not economically viable.
Because now you're back at like an Uber level, right?
Exactly. But there's a very unique opportunity here where when we start mixing autonomy into the equation, when we know certain routes can be done really, really well with autonomy, then a customer in the car could become a rider. That possibility is really near for us, not that far away. The biggest difficult thing about even Tesla, for instance, right? When Elon's like, hey, I need this car to be fully autonomous. The biggest difficulty from removing the driver from the car is the edge cases. If the edge cases are solved, autonomy is actually solved. What we're saying is let's use a human to solve for the edge cases. But first, let's start with humans driving it end to end. Then we understand exactly where the edge cases are and where autonomy is really, really good by it operating in the background, right? That's what we're going towards next step. That's how we start accelerating not only transition to all electric, but also accelerating the whole adoption of autonomy.
Now, when I think about starting your company, I just get immediately overwhelmed and I want to go to bed because it just like there's problem after problem that you seem to have been solving, not only technical and hardware and so forth, but then just marketing. I mean, I can imagine trying to get people to understand this concept. But then I'm like, okay, if you succeed at all of those things, which you seem to be, then couldn't just Jesse come in and just compete with you and be like, well, they already solved it over at Halo, so I'm just going to come in and just compete with them. So
right.
like,
I mean, I have at my house, I have a steering wheel set up with the pedals.
there you go.
I even have a shifter. I don't
So
need the shifter.
how are you going to stop Jesse from competing with you once you get this off the ground?
So, I mean, let me. This is a fantastic question, Zach, and Jesse. I don't doubt your technical capabilities whatsoever. I'm sure you're fantastic at it. But first of all, it's a big technical hurdle, right? That's the number one thing. Number two is, I'm saying let there be more competitors. That puts a heat under our ass, and we need to go faster, right? That only motivates us to be even more faster. And number two is, the world needs more people. Right? If we need to replace 280 million cars in the US that's gasoline to electric, a single company by 2030, we would never be able to do it. We need more people to come out. We need more companies to not just compete. Let's work this collectively. Let's work on this together and transitioning the world away from gasoline.
Now, I can already hear one contingent of the internet, and they're going, oh, great. Another way to have car-dependent cities, and we're never going to get to our beautiful urbanite utopia because of this company. How dare they? We should talk to the regulators and tell them to go away. What do you think about that? Like, shouldn't we just have bike paths everywhere, and shouldn't everyone have a bike, and then we wouldn't have to worry about half the problems that you're talking about?
Do you know how hot it is in Las Vegas?
Well, I'm talking about my urbanite utopia. Is this going to solve any of their problems?
So, I mean, honestly, we can't solve everybody's problems. Let's be honest about it. But we can solve 80% of the problems. That gets us somewhere, right? That's how I think about this, right? For every use case, there's going to be 50 other use cases that we can't solve yet. I'm saying yet because there might be a future where we can solve it. But if we're able to solve 80% of problems, let's think about this for a second. If we replace 80% of gasoline cars, that is a huge impact that we're delivering to the world, right? And I can be proud of leaving a legacy that is just going to change the world in ways that we've never thought about before, right? That's all I want to focus on. All these edge cases, the 20% of people are always going to complain for everything. I mean, they complained about iPhone when iPhone came out, right? So I'm okay with it. Let them complain.
Well, all right. Well, that's strong answer.
Good for you.
I appreciate that. And let me ask you another thing. So you said, if we can replace 80% of gas-powered cars, I think that a lot of people are kind of imagining, okay, there's 1 million gas cars on the road. You're going to take 800,000 of them. They're not going to be there anymore. And maybe we're going to have 800,000 EVs on the road, which replaced all of those gas cars. That's not what you're saying. You're saying that there's going to be fewer. What's the utilization rate that you think you could, for 100 gas cars, how many EVs with your technology would you need to kind of replace that many?
It's a beautiful question. I want to answer the first part of the question and I'll answer the rest of the second part too. So let's assume that if we were to replace 280 million gasoline cars to all electric, to be honest, we just don't have the infrastructure to support it. The amount of mining that we need to do in lithium is just not there yet, not even close to what we need there yet. Number two, charging infrastructure, not even close to being there yet. And number three, the manufacturing plants are not fully deployed yet or built yet to manufacture 280 million cars. But instead, if we find one car to be heavily utilized, that's the second part to your question, is if we find a way to have a lot of people in the same car over and over and over, then we can reduce the number of cars that needs to be manufactured. We can reduce the number of charging stations that needs to be deployed. We can reduce the number of many lithium mining factories that needs to go out. All that comes down drastically. So to answer your point, the mission for Halo by 2030 is to replace 20% of gasoline cars on the US, which is about 56 million cars. But we won't be deploying 56 million cars. This is ridiculously hard for us to to do, to be very honest. But each Halo car at scale is able to replace 50 to 60 cars on the road per day, right? Think about this. When a car comes to your house, you jump in, you drive it to X, like 5-10 miles, and then you drop it off. The car instantly goes to another customer that's right around the corner, and they drive it somewhere else, drop it off. It's just chained trips non-stop all day long. So it's able to remove 50 to 60 customers using their own gasoline cars, right? So we will end up deploying about 1.4 million cars in all over the US to replace 20% of all US gasoline cars. It's a huge impact for us, right? Think about reducing 20% of all carbon emissions by that time.
So I'm trying to get a handle on picturing what that ramp looks like, because right now we're talking mainly about that green square in Las Vegas, and then you're going to expand out. So what do you think your time frame is like? Where do you think you'll be, for instance, next year in Las Vegas? And then going forward, where do you think your next city would be?
This year is a humble year for us. I mean, last 4 years have been humble, to be quite honest. So this year we'll probably end up at like 50 to 100 cars, if that, right? Because we're still early stage company, right? We're still proving our technology, proving our operations, proving a business model, proving economics, all of that we're proving at the moment, as and when we start raising more and more capital, right? So this year is a humble year, 50 to 100 maybe, right? Next year is when it gets very, very interesting. This year we have huge tech milestones that we want to prove in certain geofenced areas where it's much more safer, easier for us to test, and easier for us to have a controlled environment. That's why we control ourselves that much, so we don't go rapidly all over the world. It's really difficult for us as a young company. So all that data will prove us to certain technical milestones that we will achieve ourselves internally with a small fleet of 50 to 100 cars while generating revenue, while having a clear path for profitability. That's all that happens this year. Next year will be anywhere from 5 to 10,000 cars, very comfortably deployed in about 3 different cities. And then that's when our scale starts unlocking, because now we've removed all the physical laborious challenges that are limiting our scale. That's the biggest 2 milestones we'll be hitting this year, next year. If you think about 2024 is a beautiful year for us, that's when we're projecting some form of profitability in the first couple of cities that were launched, and the fleet is now grown to about 50,000 cars. And then that's when we start working really, really closely with the manufacturing side, where all of our stacks gets integrated at the time of manufacturing and gets deployed right at the field instead of just coming to our HQ or none of that, right? So now we're thinking global expansion. We'll start thinking about 10 different cities across the world where we can start deploying, and each city will have several thousand cars, and then times the number of cars that they can actually fulfill, right? So 2024, anywhere from 100 to 200,000 cars, very comfortably. And then 2025, we'll hit about 500,000 cars.
Wow. Now, I want to talk...
I was not expecting that answer.
That's a crazy answer. Because scale is going to be very, very important for your business. Because I'm trying to think of this realistically from the perspective of a customer. You know, when I want my car, luckily it's usually right where I left it. The other day I almost got towed, and it cost me $100 in cash. That was fun.
That was cheap, actually. $100 is cheap. How did you get away with that?
Paid off the guy.
That's because the guy said it's $108, and I said, "Can you break a 20?" And he said, "100's fine." So that's called extortion. But anyway,
that's Boston for you.
That's Boston for you. So whenever you come to Boston, let me know. But so I'm trying to think. So when I want my car, it's usually right where I left it, and sometimes that's convenient for me. Other times, like when I'm leaving a concert, not so convenient. But for the most part, I don't feel like I'm waiting. I get to my car whenever I conceivably get to my car. But if I had to pull out my app and I had to say, "Car, come here, I need you," then I had to wait, then I'm going to be like, my car is taking forever. And I mean, people with Uber, we're pretty used to this, but there's so many Ubers around that you typically don't have to wait very long. So there has to be enough Halo cars on the road that at any given point, I'm only a couple minutes away from getting one delivered to me. What's the car going to have to do if there's nobody nearby? Is it going to find a parking spot and wait? Or is it going to just kind of mill around legally, wasting time?
Yeah, absolutely. So every problem, the way we think about it at Halo, the culture is a problem is an opportunity to grow, right? So there are literally 50 problems that you mentioned. We've been thinking about this for a long time. So the ideal future that we think about is not on demand, is predictive supply management, right? Think about this. There's always a pattern, what we do, right? Morning we wake up, 8:30 we go to work, and then come back at like 6 p.m. There's, predictive. That's how humans are, right? We are humans, and behaviors is our core, right? The patterns of the behavior, right? If we understand that pattern really well, a super efficient advanced machine learning model can predict this ahead of time and push a car to you even without you taking the car, even if you're taking the app. It's there for you. It's telling you before the concert's over, we know, hey, you're at a concert because you told us you're going to be at the concert. A minute before the concert's ending, hey, do you want a car right now? Say no instead of requesting one, right? That model kind of changes quite drastically. You're landing at the airport. We know which airplane you're coming in. We're tracking the delays. You're tracking the flight times. When the flight lands, the car is automatically dispersed to you, to come to you. That's the future I think about, right? These are the ways we solve for efficiencies. These are all like problems of efficiencies, right? We have to solve these very cleverly. Instead of brute force solving it, we can think smart. We can think ahead and solve these ahead of time.
Now, I want to go to an example like that. When we're talking about rush hour in the morning, I've always been of two minds of this, with like even autonomous vehicles, where I'm thinking like, oh, there'll be all these vehicles. And everyone's like, you're going to need to have enough vehicles for all these people to get to work every morning. And you're like, that's a lot. For you would need the vehicles, but you'd also need the drivers to get the vehicles to the people. Or I guess I would have one, overnight, you'd have people drive and park cars in people's driveways.
This is beautiful. There are multiple ways to solve this problem too. So one is the reason why we're calling the cities and regulatory bodies our partners is because they have infrastructure already in place. Think about city parking lots. Think about the street parking. There's so much parking that's available that's underutilized. So if we predict these demands ahead of time, hey, 8:30 sharp, you can leave to work. We will dispatch a car at 8:29 to come right at your doorstep, but not in your driveway, parked outside at the doorstep, waiting for you, right? So all these kind of predictive movement we can do. One of the biggest challenges for car share companies in the past was the biggest cost for them was repositioning the cars in cities. The way they would do it is they would send hundreds of people into the cities to find where the hell is this car and go unlock the car, get in it, and move it to go clean it, to charge it, or reposition it because they're going to get a ticket. All these kind of things was incredibly heavy logistics and operational expense for them. That's why car share companies went under. With a capability like ours, we can now reposition the car with nobody needing to be there physically present. Just for a few minutes to move it to exactly strategic lots or parking spaces that are positioned as close as possible to where the demand is going to come from, right? So all these kind of possibilities start unlocking for us.
I mean, we have you on the right channel. You're disrupting transportation, and you're on the disruptive investing channel. There's a lot of investors watching right now who might be like, this sounds really good. But you're a privately held company. Are there any funding rounds coming up or anything coming up where investors might be able to get involved?
Yeah, so we've definitely been privately funded so far. We have incredible investors that are already in the company and already on board, backing us from, people who have started. Google X was one of our lead investors, and one of the founding members of Waymo were our lead investors, right? And then we also have network carriers, part of our actual cap table, already in the company invested because the IP, they see it. Which means that we're going to be raising a lot more runs. Yes, we're going to be perpetually raising capital in the company to get to a point where we unlock stable scale and financials that we don't have to start raising external capital. Which means that later this year we'll kick off another round to come, get the company to the next stage after we unlock a few milestones.
I am super excited. When you answered that you were thinking of, your goal is to have that many cars on the road in the next few years, that's really exciting. People watching right now who might be in Las Vegas or maybe one of the next cities you're coming to, where can they go to get more information and maybe get your app?
Yeah, if you go to Halo.car, you don't have an app at all. You don't need to download anything. Everything works perfectly fine on the mobile web, because that's the future that we see as well. As people are downloading too many apps on your phones and you stop forgetting about deleting it. Just don't need it. You don't need another app, right? So just go to Halo.car and you can literally go through, click the book now button, go through the process. It's about $10 an hour, very affordable rates. You can just get a car delivered to you when you're next time in Vegas. Unfortunately, it's not at the airport yet, but one day it will be. But then if you just come outside a little bit of the airport, you can get it. or anywhere inside the city, you can get it as well. That's the best way to do it. Also, you can follow us on social, Halo.car _ on Insta, Halo.car _ in Twitter. So that's the best way to get more info about us.
Anand, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been fascinating. I can't wait to follow you guys as you grow throughout the US and the world.
And you know what? If you guys come down to Vegas, let me know. I'll give you a ride in the car. We'll demo the whole thing. You can see our pilots driving.
Awesome.
I think it'll be a fun experience.
Maybe CES next year, like
That'd be great.
early next
There you
year.
go.
All right.
Awesome.
That sounds great.
Sounds good.